Hello and welcome to Rise of Humanity, Personal Development for the Spiritual Warrior. I'm your host, Chris Karamaya, and today I'm very grateful to be joined by my guest, Anna Yusim, to discuss her unique and amazing work in combining spirituality and psychiatry as a way for finding new levels of meaning and fulfillment in life. She is a graduate of Stanford University and the Yale University School of Medicine, and through her work has helped more than 1,000 patients lead happier and more meaningful lives. Anna is the author of the incredible new book, Fulfilled: How the Science of Spirituality Can Help You Live a Happier, More Meaningful Life, which has received rave reviews and endorsements from the likes of Marianne Williamson and many more authorities in the field. Anna, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having me.
So I just want to start by asking, there's a picture of you on your social media sitting with Deepak Chopra holding a copy of your book. I was just wondering, how did you make that happen? How did you get all these amazing endorsements?
That's so funny. Part of my book is really about synchronicity, which is meaningful coincidences. And my belief about things of this nature is that you need to do what you're meant to be doing in the world, and then you get help from the universe. And that's really how a lot of these connections happen with Marianne Williamson, with Deepak Chopra. The Deepak connection happened because my husband, who's a filmmaker, was actually filming something with Deepak. And I went to the filming and I was sitting quietly in the corner and thought, well, if the opportunity presents, I asked the universe for some help. I'm like, please enable us to have a few minutes and see if Deepak would be willing to take a look at my book. And indeed, the opportunity presented. And just in that moment, Deepak was like, let me take a look. He read my book and he gave me this endorsement. So it was really just an unexpected but wonderful opening. And the same thing happened with Marianne Williamson. So I feel like if you're doing your work in the world, the universe tries to help you with that and tries to connect you with like-minded people.
Yes, that's a beautiful point. It's something I definitely agree with, that when you put your energy out into the universe, it definitely conspire to help you and bring amazing synchronicities and things into your life. So I'd like to begin with creating sort of an outline of your story for the listeners and what events started you on the path to where you are today with your psychiatry practice and writing the book on spirituality. Because at the beginning of your book, you write how you were living the life that you felt you were supposed to live and not the life that you wanted to live. Could you just start from there, really?
Exactly. And so I started studying to be a doctor in Stanford University. I was, at the time, going to be a mathematician because I come from a long line of mathematicians, and everybody in my family loves math, and I understandably fell in love with math. But somehow along the way, I started doing neurobiology research in the laboratory of Dr. Robert Sapolsky and started falling in love with the function of the brain. And then from there, went along to medical school, to doing all of these things, which actually are very much in line with my passions. But somehow or another, my life hit a bump in the road, and it made me question a lot of these things. One of them was, here I am on this path, which I'm passionate about on one hand, but something within me feels unfulfilled. And I realized that part of that was because even though I was passionate about many things, I really hadn't stopped to question who I really was and what I needed to be happy. And this all happened, it came to a head in the course of my psychiatry residency, where my life hit what I call a dark night of the soul. I was dating this man and things just did not work out. And academically, for the first time in my life, things were not working out as well. All of these things create, and I describe it in more detail in my book, but all these things created for me this feeling of, here I am with all these healing tools under my belt, but somehow I can't even help myself. And so this was where I encountered for the first time the limits of Western medicine, and also kind of this feeling of emptiness inside despite doing what I felt I was supposed to do and being on my so-called path. And that's when I figured that if I'm going to be helping people in this world, I need to figure out first and foremost how to heal and help myself. And that's when I went on this spiritual path for the first time. And I started introducing myself to other modes of healing and understanding really the world. And I spent time in ashrams in India, learning also Buddhist meditation in Thailand, working with shaman in South Africa and South America, and eventually returning to New York City to study Kabbalah and other forms of esoteric wisdom. And in the course of all this, my own life started to shift. I started feeling happy for the first time in a really different way. My feelings of emptiness sort of started to float away finally, and then I finally really felt on my path. So at first, I integrated that into my own life and eventually wrote this book to be able to help patients who feel similarly.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. And could you talk about, and it's something you talk about in your book, this idea of wearing masks, because I think it's very um, not well known enough, and I think it's a very important thing that people need to understand in order to achieve fulfillment. So could you explain that idea a little bit of the masks?
Sure, yes. So the masks are part of my chapter on authenticity. And authenticity is being who you are at the core level, your essential self, or connected and aligned with your soul. So how do you get in touch with your soul, and how do you start to listen to the voice of your soul when you're so bombarded with all these other voices around you of how you need to be living your life? So that was really where I found myself stuck, because everybody was saying, you need to be this, you need to do this kind of work, have this kind of life, look like this, think like this. And in doing so, you try to do it right. You try to, fit in. And so you're putting on all these masks and you start taking on these identities of the way that you need to be thinking, the way that you need to be living your day to day. But something, in it really isn't resonating because you've missed your soul the whole time. So masks are a way of obscuring your soul. And the consequence of wearing masks is anxiety, depression, feeling out of alignment with yourself, feeling empty, sometimes obsessive thinking and rumination. And it's only by connecting to your true self and starting to align with that and disentangling yourself from all your masks can you really get on your life path and start to feel whole again.
I think the idea of achievement versus fulfillment is maybe a big mass that people wear, and that they think that they have to achieve a certain amount of success in order to be approved of and fulfilled. And I think a prime example of this was the actor Robin Williams, and I know that Tony Robbins talked about it a lot after he died, that he became so consumed by, I have to achieve all these goals, and you miss the big picture. That, I mean, the fulfillment doesn't necessarily come from achievement. Are they two different things in your experience?
Absolutely. And, it's not to say that achievement is something we need to avoid or it's negative or evil or anything like that. On the contrary, so much of life is predicated on achievement. But just like you said, and as was the case of Robin Williams, eventually achievement could be just one of the many masks that we could wear to alienate ourselves from our true self. And the question you can ask to figure out what role is achievement playing in my life is, does more achievement make me happy? Or does more achievement actually lead me to need even more achievement and therefore feel even emptier inside? If indeed it's the second, then what the achievement has become is a mask and a form of addiction. An addiction is something where the more of it you get, the emptier you feel. That's one of the ways of understanding an addiction. And if you're achieving more and more and feeling good, feeling like you're living your purpose and doing your work in this world, wonderful, keep achieving. If it ever gets to the point where achievement is just filling a void, but it's doing so without really helping you feel better and more aligned with your soul and your purpose, it's time to change course and rethink that.
Yes, definitely. I think it's a very, very important distinction to make, and obviously it's very important to make sure that you are doing something which you are very much aligned with. I just wanted to ask you about your trip to South America, because in your book, you say that it was a big turning point for you. And you went to Iguazu Falls in Argentina. I actually went there in 2015 as well. So it was really funny for me to read that about how you had this amazing experience and kind of awakening there, because it was quite a transformative trip for me as well. So could you just explain why that was a turning point for you?
Absolutely. So this was when I had mentioned, a relationship wasn't working out and academically things were difficult. And it was in Iguazu that all of this came to a head. And I realized just how empty I was feeling inside, despite what it looked like on the outside. Here I was on the outside wearing the smile that I just tend to wear, and really inside feeling so sad, empty, and alone. So relationship-wise, what was going on in my life is that I had been dating this man and realized that this is just one of a long line of men who it turned out was emotionally unavailable. That somehow or another, this man would never be able to be emotionally available in the way that I had hoped. Even though he had said he wanted a commitment, when it came down to it, he was scared. He, was saying one thing, but his actions were suggesting another. And when we keep drawing into our lives something over and over and over, we have to realize that the common denominator isn't the men. The common denominator is us. I was the common denominator. And it was then that I realized this really important spiritual principle. The principle being that we don't draw into our lives what we want. We draw into our lives who we are. I had been drawing in these emotionally unavailable men because there was a part of me that was emotionally unavailable and so scared of commitment. And although I was saying, yes, I still want to find my soulmate, I want to get married, a part of my heart obviously hadn't fully transformed and opened up in order to draw in love because of who I was drawing into my life. And it was only then that I started really working and opening my heart in a whole new way and trying to clear up my own fears of commitment and my own emotional unavailability. And so finally, in this process, I was able to meet my husband, to whom I was married last year at the age of 39.
Wow, it's beautifully said. Thank you for that. So, you say in your book one of your biggest fears that the quest for fulfillment was a lost cause and maybe something that would be just too difficult to attain. But obviously, you've proved that wrong. I mean, just for people, anyone listening who maybe feels like they are living in darkness at the moment and struggling to see the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. I mean, what would you say to those people?
Yeah, I think that, it's inevitable to sometimes feel that the thing that we most want, can elude us. And we can have fears that even though we've been able to achieve so many things in our lives, our deepest fear could be that actually the thing that we most want, which for me in my life at the time was love, that it was a fool's errand. It was never going to happen. And why would I think that it would never happen? For me, I believe that I had that fear because I kept over and over creating this self-destructive pattern by drawing in the wrong men. And that to me started creating this world of, wow, relationships just don't work out for me. It was that belief I started developing about myself. Achievement-wise, things could work out, and the more effort I put in, things seemed to manifest. But relationship-wise, the more effort I put in, things didn't seem to work. And so I would advise people who feel that way in their own life to start identifying what is that self-sabotaging pattern and what implicit core beliefs have you developed because of that. And then what kinds of shifts do you need to make within yourself to shift those core beliefs and to transform yourself to find the fulfillment you're looking for, both in relationships and otherwise.
Nice, that's great advice. So, I'd like to talk about your psychiatry practice now and how you actually start implementing spirituality into it and what that looks like.
Yeah, so patients come to me from all walks of life, and everybody has different beliefs about spirituality and also about whether or not they want spirituality to be a part of our healing work together. A lot of patients come, and especially having read my book, they're very interested and wanting that from their psychiatrist. They feel as though, like myself, something has been missing from a spiritual standpoint, and they want to fill that emptiness or void with, among other things, spiritual growth and transformation, in addition to psychological understanding. So with those patients, it's generally pretty straightforward because we figure out how do we integrate the spiritual tools that we could use. That being said, I also have patients come from very different perspectives who could be very skeptical of spirituality or feel actually that their own faith in anything spiritual or the connection to part of something greater has been shaken because of life challenges or difficult circumstances. So in a way, many patients come with crises of faith, and together we figure out slow but sure baby steps to help them transform that as well, if they're open and willing. And the third category are people who don't want spirituality, who come and say, yeah, I know that you have this focus, but you know what? I just want psychiatry. I want psychological tools. Maybe I want medication. Maybe I want herbal and complementary alternative treatments, but the whole spiritual thing, it's not for me. And that's completely okay as well. There's many different paths to healing, and so for me, it's about helping my patients identify what resonates most deeply with them and feels most authentic, and how can we use that to help them achieve their goals.
That's wonderful. So I'm curious, when you get, say, a new patient or someone who is struggling, is it difficult to build up that level of trust where they will share everything with you, or do they hide things? Is it something which takes a lot of time and is a process?
Yes, and with every patient, it's different. Usually when a patient comes, they're ready for help. You know, there's been some statistics as to how long does it take someone with a problem to actually reach out to a professional. The average, it's pretty shocking, but the average is 6 years. So this is 6 years of often very painful and unnecessary suffering before somebody reaches out. So usually when they walk through my door, it's a really big deal, and they're ready for help and they're wanting help. Now, does that mean that they're going to pour out their heart to me immediately and trust me and really open up? Sometimes. But sometimes, just like you said, it's really a process, and trust really needs to be built, because the things that patients will eventually share with their psychiatrist, doctor, or therapist are often things they've never shared with anybody else. It's really the most vulnerable parts of their soul that they feel might somehow be unlovable, or they're going to be judged, or they're going to be criticized. And so sometimes it really takes time to build that trust that they're going to be safe, that anything that they share here is okay, no matter how reprehensible they think it may be, no matter how aggressive, no matter how sexual, whatever it is, that this is all part of being a human being, and this is the safe space to share that.
Nice. So I'd like to ask you, what ways does your work serve you? I mean, it's very much focused on helping others. And what do you get from the healing process? And also, I know one of the principles you talk about in your book is the mirror principle. I mean, could you just talk a little bit on that?
Sure. So the mirror principle is what I mentioned regarding my own journey, and actually all of our journeys as to who we draw into our lives. We don't draw into our lives who we want. We draw into our lives who we are. And that's relevant in so many ways. Oftentimes a patient will come in and they're like, you know what, I can't find an honest business partner. One person after the other is somehow dishonest. Why is this happening to me? When someone says something like that, we start to be curious together. In what ways may you be being dishonest in any way with yourself or the people in your life? And when we can answer that question and shift that, suddenly more honest people start coming into that person's life. So that's a way in which I will use that principle with patients. Now, The other question, how does the work serve me? It's actually also very much the mirror principle. Everybody we draw in is a reflection of ourselves in some way. So what I often see is whatever issue it is that I'm grappling with in my life, I'll have 3 patients come in that week, kind of with that being their own core issue. It's really just fascinating. If I'm feeling particularly anxious in a week, I'll have 3 patients with anxiety. If I'm feeling that my thoughts, that I'm ruminating on something, I'll have 3 patients come in with rumination. Things like that. And it's really just, amazing to me how our internal world reflects as our external world. The people we draw in really are just reflections of us.
Ah, that's amazing. Very cool. So, how would you compare now the effectiveness of your work having incorporated the spirituality as opposed to maybe before when it was very much Western based? Have you found that it's become a much more effective form of work?
What I've seen is that patients who do choose to embrace a spiritual model and to use that as a part of therapy, whether that be in our work together or whether it's actually been something that patients have had, like they go to church and they could use, the prayers of church to connect and kind of build upon our work. Or they start taking a Kabbalah class, or they have a meditation practice that they can incorporate some of the work that we do together into. That usually helps people to heal quicker, more thoroughly, and more completely. And it's really powerful tools. That being said, if people don't have that, that's okay. If they're open to developing it, over time we do. Sometimes I'll work with someone for years before they realize, you know what, I think this is something I want to try. And they try it and their life opens up. I have seen this again and again and again. It's a really beautiful thing.
Wow. And then how much of a role, maybe like percentage wise, would you say that prescribing medication plays in your practice?
Yeah, so about 50% of the patients I treat take a psychiatric medication, which is a fairly low percentage for a psychiatrist. The other 50%, they come for primarily therapy, whether it be psychological therapy or integrating spirituality. And the patients who do take medication, it's always together with therapy, with spirituality. And for certain people, medications are a lifeline without which it's very hard for them to get by. And that's people with really severe bipolar disorder, or who may have been diagnosed with schizophrenia, or who have OCD that is so bad it keeps them from being able to leave the house or get anything done. So there's certainly people for whom medications are a really important tool. That being said, there's a lot of people who come in who are kind of on the fence. They're like, I think I might want to try a medication. I've never tried one, but I've actually been really depressed for 6 years, and I'm just wondering, can a medication really help me? And so then, at that point, if they're not severely depressed and suicidal, they really do have a reasonable choice. Medication certainly is an option, but so is trying therapy without medication. So is trying complementary and alternative medicines like acupuncture or other forms of healing. So often, in my practice, patients really do have a choice as to which direction to go.
Very interesting. So you've written this amazing book, Fulfilled. At what point did you feel maybe it was the right time to write a book, and what was your kind of inspiration and motivation behind writing a book?
So, with synchronicity playing such a large role in my life, that actually also led to the writing of this book. The way that this book had its seed planted was in the workshop of a woman who's become a dear friend of mine, Marva Allen. So Marva runs some writing workshops in New York City's Academy of Life. And it's just, on Saturdays, a 4-hour writing workshop. And I thought to myself for a long time, I love to write. I really want to one day write a book. Why don't I go to this workshop? So about 2 years ago, I decided to go to this workshop with Marva, and we all wrote and we all shared our writing. And then afterwards, Marva came up to me and she's like, Anna, I think you have a book in you. Let me mentor you. I want to help you. So we met for dinner, and Marva did for me what was the most useful thing. She gave me a copy of a proposal, and she's like, Anna, this is what a book proposal looks like. I want you to go write a proposal. You have 1 month, and then we're going to get you a literary agent. So I said, okay. Here I have my assignment from my new mentor. So I went to this writing retreat place in Kripalu and did this other writing workshop with this man who also became a close friend, Eric Meisel. And Eric helped me to create a really nice proposal based on the outline that Marva gave me. And by the end of the workshop, I had it. I had my proposal. So then with Eric, with Marva, and with a few other people, I sent it out to a few literary agents, and this wonderful agent came back, Cassie Hangian, and said, I like your proposal. I want to represent you. So then Cassie and I worked to improve it, pitch it out to a number of publishing houses, and then we met with this one editor who I just felt it was like a just kind of love at first sight, beautiful, beautiful connection, Sarah Pells. And we ended up working with her, and she's been the most wonderful editor for this book. She helped to really bring it to its genesis, and that was how this book came to be.
Very nice. And could you just talk about the actual structure of the book? I mean, you start off with your story, and then it's split up into these three core beliefs: authenticity, soul correction, and part of something greater. Could you explain just briefly what each of those means for the listeners?
Yeah, so authenticity, like we talked about, is connecting to the core part of who you are, really connecting to yourself and aligning with your soul. And that is who you are separate from everybody else's expectations of you, separate from what your parents expected, or what society expected, or what your children or your wife or husband may expect. And at the core, aligning with your soul and your purpose, that's authenticity. Soul correction is really what your soul has come into this world to correct, which is those challenges that keep coming up in our lives over and over and over, often much to our chagrin and dismay, and despite our best efforts to change them. So everyone has different soul corrections, and I talk about 4 primary ones in this book, and they are transforming fear, improving relationships, harnessing personal power, and releasing addictions. And then the third part of the book is called Part of Something Greater. And that's really focusing on a lot of the spiritual elements that define our world. How to incorporate synchronicity into your life. And I've given a few examples of that. How to elevate our consciousness. How to embrace the unity and interconnectedness that defines us. And finally, this principle of immortality, which is based on the idea of Père Teilhard de Chardin, which is that we're not just physical beings having occasional spiritual experiences. We're actually spiritual beings having this temporary physical experience.
Wow, that's beautifully said. And so is this framework that you've created in your book, is that very much tied into how you're working one-on-one with your patient? Do you dip into different sections depending on where they're at in their life?
Exactly, exactly. And in the book, the whole book is very much based on patient cases, because I think that how can people best recognize their own issues and grow and transform, but to hear other people like themselves and how they've done the same process. So in the course of my book, I've outlined 50 patient stories. Of course, they're all disguised in order to preserve the confidentiality of the patients, but it's how very real patients with whom I've worked over the last 10 years have transformed their life and overcome fear, harnessed their personal power, cultivated faith and forgiveness, used synchronicity in their lives, and many, many other things in the book.
And with this book, I'm just curious if is this very much focused on just helping people as much as you can, or are you interested in trying to almost change the landscape of psychiatry? Because there's a study done which you share in your book that says only 10% of psychiatrists believe spirituality to be important in their work, but 65% of patients want that. Is that a percentage that you'd like to maybe adjust a bit with your book, or you just focus on helping the individual?
Very much so. It's actually both, because while this book is written for the layperson, the common person, it's, meaning that it's something anybody could benefit from in terms of just the struggles that we as human beings deal with. The people that I hope most will read the book is indeed my colleagues, because it's in my profession, in the medical profession, and in psychiatry that often has the most skepticism and doubt about spiritual interventions. And that's why I wrote this book, in order to give examples of how integrating spiritual practices and spiritual ideas in a medical practice could actually help patients grow, evolve, and transform. And, maybe 15 years ago, a book like this would have been received with a lot of skepticism by the medical community. But I actually feel very fortunate and very lucky, because two former presidents of the American Psychiatric Association and one former president of the World Psychiatric Association, which are essentially the governing bodies of psychiatrists in this country and in the world, have stood behind the book and offered endorsements. So I feel like now, finally, the medical and psychiatric community is indeed accepting these ideas as legitimate and important.
Wow, it's amazing that you got that support for your book. I wondered, did you feel any resistance at any point, or any fear towards releasing the book, or were you just very much just focused on your mission?
Well, a combination of both. I felt like I needed to obviously do this work in the world, because this is what I've come here to do. Yet, I certainly have had colleagues and friends say, "What are you doing? This is career suicide. You're writing about spirituality as a psychiatrist? What are you thinking? Stop that. Stay straight. Stay on course. Is this why you went to medical school?" So I was certainly, greeted with that as well.
Yes. So there's a couple of questions that I like to ask the guests in every interview. And the first one would be, what would be your number one tip for spiritual warriors who are looking to upgrade their personal performance today?
That's such a great question. I would say, first and foremost, to connect and align with your soul and ask yourself, are you living an authentic life? And if the answer is yes, wonderful. If the answer is no, to do this little exercise where you start asking yourself throughout the course of the day the following question: what do I most deeply desire? And whatever that is, to really just take note and take heed of that. It could be you desire a candy bar, or a steak, or an apple. It could be food, or it could be something much deeper of what your soul desires. Because ultimately, even though it could start with more external, objective things, eventually we want to get to the core of what you desire at the soul level, which could be, I desire to help humanity. I desire love. I desire to be in nature. I desire more time for myself. I desire to reconnect with one of my deepest friends that I've lost over time. Whatever that is, to really start questioning that and connecting to your soul in that way.
Great advice. And the second question is, what would be your best advice on how the spiritual warrior can contribute to the rise of humanity?
The best way the spiritual warrior can contribute to the rise of humanity is to be the best version of themselves, to connect to their souls, to align with their authenticity, to understand and live according to their soul corrections, and to really connect to part of something greater, meaning harnessing synchronicity in your life, elevating your consciousness, and really honoring the interconnectedness of all things.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that advice. So Anna, where can the listeners find out more about you?
Sure. My book is available anywhere that books are sold, either online on Amazon or any bookstore, and also on my website, www.annayusim.com, which is ANNAYUSIM as in Mary.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So, well, Anna, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show to share your knowledge and wisdom. And I feel that your work will bring so much light to the world. And I'm very grateful for that. And I just thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. So, well, that's all for today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Rise of Humanity, and we'll check out Anna's book, Fulfilled. I will be posting the link to her site in the show notes, and definitely check out the book because it's full of incredible wisdom and will make a huge impact in your life if you implement it. So that's all for today, guys. Thank you very much. Until next time. Bye-bye.